Hi, I'm Julia Gonzalez from the Office for Students. From August 1st, registered universities and colleges in England will be required to protect students from harassment and sexual misconduct as part of our new condition of registration, E6. In this video, I'll answer higher education providers' questions about the single comprehensive source of information they need to produce to comply with condition E6. The single comprehensive source of information must comply with our minimum content requirements, the prominence principles, and the content principles in Condition E6. As part of the minimum content requirements, providers should be clear about interventions and actions they're taking related to prevention and protecting students from harassment and sexual misconduct, reporting, handling of information, investigations, decision making, training for students and staff, and support for those involved in incidents of harassment and sexual misconduct. This should also include your policies on intimate personal relationships between staff and students. The single comprehensive source of information must adhere to both the prominence principles and the content principles. As part of the prominence principles, the single comprehensive source of information must be accessible to current and prospective students, published in a prominent place on your website, proactively shared with all staff and students at least once a year, and linked to from relevant documents, including prospectuses and staff and student handbooks. As part of the content principles, we acknowledge that you may have other policies which are related to those on harassment and sexual misconduct that you wish to include in your single comprehensive source of information. These could include policies on domestic violence, bullying, or safeguarding. You're welcome to include these as long as the additional information doesn't undermine or contradict any of the minimum content requirements, the freedom of speech principles, or other duties or regulatory requirements relating to freedom of speech. To be clear, the legal duty to take reasonably practicable steps to secure freedom of speech does not prevent institutions from having robust anti-bullying and anti-harassment policies. Rather, institutions must ensure that these policies are carefully worded and implemented in a way that respects and upholds their free speech obligations. It must also include a provision which makes it clear that the minimum content requirements take precedence over other information and provisions. The single comprehensive source of information can be a single document, a web page with all the relevant policies and procedures, or a website with links to other relevant documents that also provides a summary. You must be transparent about any changes to the content of the single comprehensive source of information. Transparency about policies and procedures is important. For example, students should be clear about how a complaint will be handled if your policies have changed between an alleged incident taking place and the complaint being raised. You must also ensure historical versions are easily accessible and adhere to the prominence principles mentioned earlier. This may include keeping historical versions which are relevant to complaints or investigations. As E6 is an ongoing condition of registration, you don't need to submit information such as your single comprehensive source of information to us on a routine basis. However, if we receive information about concerns or issues with your compliance with the condition, we might ask you to explain the approach you've taken to meet the relevant requirement and provide further information to us. One of the minimum content requirements requires providers to set out the steps they'll take to make a significant and credible difference in protecting students from behavior that may amount to harassment and/or sexual misconduct, including but not limited to steps to prevent harassment and sexual misconduct. We view steps that could make a significant and credible difference are ones that lead to a reduction in the prevalence of harassment and/or sexual misconduct and would protect students from its impact. The steps that each provider takes will depend on their context. In considering which steps are likely to make a significant and credible difference, providers need to engage with their student population and understand their experiences related to harassment and/or sexual misconduct. When taking steps to prevent harassment, providers need to comply with the requirements included in Condition E6 and elsewhere to uphold freedom of speech and academic freedom. This includes taking reasonably practicable steps to secure freedom of speech within the law. Consistently with this, providers should take steps to address harassment and should promote campus cultures that are open to constructive and tolerant discussion. In our guidance, we provided some examples of the steps you might consider to make a significant and credible difference in protecting students from behavior that may amount to harassment or sexual misconduct, and reducing the likelihood of harassment and sexual misconduct. These include considering the potential needs of different groups of students. This might mean working with student groups or representatives and inviting students to provide feedback. Collecting, monitoring, and publishing data where this is likely to inform effective action to protect students from behavior that may amount to harassment or sexual misconduct. Undertaking credible and evidence-based evaluation of the steps it's taking and reviewing and adjusting the approach as appropriate. It's important that you're evaluating the effectiveness of any steps you introduce and considering how your interventions might build on practices already proven to be effective. We recognize you can't always guarantee the outcomes from steps you take, so evaluation will be an important tool to help you understand and improve the impact of the steps implemented. And consider how to best prevent the use, enforcement, and/or reliance on non-disclosure agreements. To note, the free speech duties introduce a wider legally binding obligation related to NDAs, which in addition to students applies to staff, members of the provider, and visiting speakers, and requires providers not to enter into NDAs related to complaints about sexual abuse, sexual harassment or misconduct, bullying, or harassment. This isn't an exhaustive list. We consider these examples are likely to make a significant and credible difference as they place significant emphasis on the need for a provider to engage with its students and their particular experiences of harassment and sexual misconduct in order to determine the steps that might be needed. We expect that providers will consider their own context and engage with their students when determining steps that are significant and credible. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and we hope you found it useful to understand our requirements in relation to the single comprehensive source of information. We have more information on our website, including the full condition and detailed guidance, guides and webinars for students and higher education providers, as well as our guidance related to freedom of speech.